So hello everyone, and welcome to another Insights from Women Leaders event. My name is Rola Kaakeh, for those that are new to the series and haven't seen me before. I'm the CEO of Salus Vitae Group, and I'll be the host for the event. Now, for those that are joining us again, you already know a little bit of background about the series, but for those that are new to the series in general and to these types of conversations, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today to hear from our leader. Just a little background on the Insights from Women Leaders series in general. We launched the series in October of 2020 as a platform to hear from women leaders with varied backgrounds and perspectives on the topics of leadership, addressing current and future challenges, and what skills we need moving forward, and then how their experiences have shaped their outlooks as well. Now, the goal of this series is to learn from women thought leaders and decision makers to empower current and future leaders, both men and women, to positively impact their organizations and communities. Now, diversity of thought, experiences, industries, education, and training is important to us, as it highlights the mosaic of perspectives that are represented in different settings that help drive decision-making and positive change. Now, our guests have included leaders from various prestigious and reputable institutions and various organizations of different sizes from across the globe. Now, their backgrounds are diverse, their accomplishments many, and the insights and perspectives they provided have been extremely valuable. Now, I encourage everyone to check out the recordings of the previous guest leaders if you haven't already done so. They're all available for free on our website, salusvitaegroup.com. Now, over the course of the hour today, we're going to ask our guest leader a number of questions. I'm going to start first, and then we're going to actually open it up to audience questions. So feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box. You can also submit them in the chat, but we look at the Q&A box first. Also, feel free to post any key takeaways that you have or comments that you have about the conversation in the Q&A box. And then you're also welcome when you do maybe post it on social media, you can tag us at Salus Vitae Group so we can see how you benefited from the event. Now, the conversation today is recorded and it's going to be available for replay after the event, and all are going to be available on our website. Now let's get started. I'm going to jump right in, and I'm very pleased to welcome and introduce Dr. Joy Bhosai. Did I say that correctly? The pronunciation?
Thank you, Rola. It's great to be here with you. You are pretty close. My last name is pronounced Bhosai.
Bhosai, okay. I just wanted to make sure. So a little bit about, of course, as someone who I get my name mispronounced all the time. So I'm making a special effort to do that. So Joy is the co-founder and CEO of Pluto Health, a company focused on improving patient access and addressing care gaps through a health platform that bridges siloed real-world data. She previously served as Chief of Digital Health and Strategy for the Duke Clinical Research Institute. Through previous public health work in Africa and Asia, she developed innovations focused on improving access to health services that were used for clinical trials, which then led her to founding a health tech organization dedicated to developing patient safety and communication tools deployed across both academic and private health systems. Joy is an alumni of Pomona College, where she studied anthropology and neuroscience, and then a previous Fulbright Scholar. She received an MPH from Yale, focusing on global health management, and an MD with distinction from UCSF, where she completed the Global Health Pathways concentration and completed the Management and Leadership Residency program at Duke. So thank you again so much, and welcome to this series.
Thank you, Rola. It's great to be here.
So let's go ahead and get started. So for the people that have attended this before, they know our general format. We've been asking our guest leaders very similar questions throughout, but then of course we can integrate and build off of that conversation. Obviously addressing gaps in access to information and care is of interest to mine, I know to many, but we're going to talk about that kind of dispersed throughout the different questions. Now, leading to, we always start with the questions or the Q&A with the same first question, and that is, did you expect to be where you are today?
Absolutely not. So I would say that I fell into this The role that I am in now and the startup that we're building by accident, I think you'd mentioned that I studied anthropology at Pomona College. So this is very far off being in the health tech world now and as a physician. So in my early days, I was really interested from an anthropology perspective, understanding patterns of human behavior, understanding how people access medical care. So a lot of the medical anthropologists spend a lot of time understanding the health system drivers that affect how people use the health system. I was very much on the global health pathway, but then I was introduced to technology inadvertently while I was at UCSF. We had received a grant to integrate technology into our project. So at the time I was working in Tanzania and Niger. And one of the biggest pain points was trying to figure out how to keep track of patients and their needs and have them communicate back to us really effectively without disrupting daily life flow, because folks are very, very busy. And so we developed a mobile, basically like the equivalent of a mobile EMR, and to help the clinics run efficiently and keep lines of communication open with patients. That is when I fell in love with technology. Honestly, when I was there, I thought that was the last thing we needed was an iPhone app. Like you're thinking, okay, we need clean running water, we need like good supplies, things like that. But I saw how valuable it was to be able to organize and communicate with patients and run things effectively. So that was my sort of introduction into a longer chapter in my life in the health technology sector.
Very nice. So then, and I think actually that's a great, I know that you're saying that anthropology seems way kind of far, but I think it's such a great base because of truly understanding the various different elements. And I'm sure, as you also probably saw throughout your career, you probably touched on so many of those elements that you might have seen it in a specific lens that maybe your colleagues might not have, not given that background. So yeah, I definitely like how people transition from different areas of interest within that. So when you now think about the future, so you've been building, like you're saying, different interests brought you to where you are. What is in your future? Ultimately, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I think it's a collective legacy. So I think for me and our team, we are highly committed to improving access to care for patients, to try to improve the patchy, desperate care that's being delivered, both in the United States and abroad. What I have been really excited about is how to apply technology in a cost-effective way to ensure that patients have quality access. You hear a lot about concerns how introducing technology can exacerbate digital divides, things like that. But I truly believe if you innovate with intention and meaning and keeping an eye out for the population that you're intending to serve, you could really improve the care and lives of many, many people. So for our future, we want to help bridge any gaps that patients and populations experience and help get them access to the care that they need. I'm a firm believer that if you are a human, you should have the best access to healthcare available, and it shouldn't matter how much you earn and things like that. So we want to do our part in making sure health is delivered equitably.
Nice. I do have a question on that later too, with regards to just kind of equity in general, with regards to access, but we can talk a little bit more about it when we get to kind of present initiatives that you guys are working on, since I know it is an area that you guys are particularly focused on. So when we think, so when you are talking about your particular legacy or your organization's kind of outlook or perspective, how have your maybe past or present experiences really shaped this for you? Is this something that you've always ultimately been interested in, or is this also something you kind of stumbled upon and were building? Kind of how have your experiences brought not only to where you are today, but kind of have that forward vision?
Yeah. Well, so I'll go back. I guess it all goes back to like our childhoods sometimes. So I grew up in a family. My dad immigrated from Thailand, did not graduate high school, but was so like, he has such a firm commitment about contributing to society. So when we were younger, my dad started nursing homes for adults with disabilities who were given up to the state because their parents could not have capacity to take care of them. And so from a very early age, I was introduced to the idea that healthcare involves so much more than just being a doctor. Granted, I am a physician now, but there's so much involved into caring for someone. And it really takes a team. It really takes acknowledgement that the whole system needs to run smoothly to ensure that the patient gets good care. And so that has really shaped my outlook into how I view what we need for patients. And then, you know, the other piece is that, you know, as we were building, as my family was building their business, like we experienced a lot of issues where, you know, my family would have to get repeat exams, you know, carry medical records back and forth. This was like in the 80s and 90s. And so this was well before like the digitization of EMRs, but like when there are gaps in knowledge and data that your provider does not see, patient ends up paying way more, and it can cripple families. I mean, it can put them into debt. It's not okay. And so our goal, I guess, and as a company, and also my goal is to make sure that those things are prevented and mitigated as much as possible for families, and that we really try to understand that taking care of a patient is just, you know, there are many steps involved, and how do we engage in strategic partnerships so that we can deliver things effectively?
Yeah, that's very fair. So I'm a healthcare provider. I'm a pharmacist, and I remember even thinking that you could literally be down the street from a medical center, or whoever the patient's coming from, and you have such limited access to information on the patient. And so you're trying to ask the patient themselves, which are often overwhelmed. They're not really understanding anyway, and you're trying to gauge that sort of information to try to best assist them. And so there is such a big gap. And most people think that the gap has to exist if something is very far. It's like you could literally be across the street from an institution and have that. And so, and like you said, that you know that there's all these different elements that go into the health care or the health of an individual. And so trying that is definitely very important. I think we all see that even within our own care, even if you have the best care possible, there's so many of those fragments, for sure. Now, the issues that you are trying to address, right, this gap in information, these are big topics: equity within information, utilizing health IT. There's, you know, different challenges and opportunity. You know, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of challenges. We speak a lot about in the series either your own individual kind of challenges you overcame as you're kind of building whatever it is that you're building, or, you know, failures that you've had. Can you speak to any of those, or would you like to share any of those types of challenges and maybe how you overcame them, so that you can kind of continue to push through?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll share on a personal level a challenge, I guess, growing up, both as an Asian American, but also a female. I think one of the challenges is that you undersell your knowledge set, and you don't showcase it as much. And I guess growing up, I was taught that being humble and being quiet and observant is actually a good characteristic to have, and it's a strength. It doesn't mean you're shy. It doesn't mean that you are not confident. It just means you like to observe and you are reflective. And so when that translates into the business world, it's very different, right? So you often get under-recognized, and things like that. So I've had to do a personality stretch in order to overcome some of those. But I think at the end of the day, reflecting back on what's really been helpful is I've had to reframe my thoughts and saying, okay, voicing your opinions and your perspectives is not actually being overconfident and about you showcasing things. It's really about collectively sharing your insights and making sure that the project or initiatives move forward. And so I think as women, we also, I mean, I can't speak for all women, but we tend to do that where it's like we understand what's going on, but maybe sharing our insights is really helpful all around in the table. And when we refocus it on the mission and the collaborative spirit of getting the project done, I think, it helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you for also mentioning that. I think we've found that throughout some of the conversations we've been having, and a lot of the attendees, is that seems to be a barrier for them, right? Like this whole, you're told to be humble and the aspect of listening. But I loved how you said this whole stretch of personality and character to understand when that makes sense and how that makes sense to state so that you contribute to something beyond yourself, which is actually a very great thought process, because like you had mentioned, there's so many people that struggle with that. And sometimes it's a day-to-day thing too. You're just like, okay, I want to be humble. I want to do that. But also, how do I make sure that my skills are best utilized for that? So yeah, great point there. Now, also, as we talk about the future, and you're in the technology, I think anybody that's in the technology space is always extra excited about the future, right? But what excites you about the future?
Oh, so many things. So what I'm really excited in the medical field is I feel like we're at this point, a tipping point, where we can meaningfully utilize data to make things more curated and personalized for patients. We can also use data to make sure that care is being delivered in a quality manner. I often see patients who I've been a hospital medicine patient at Duke, or doctor, I guess patient and doctor at Duke, where, I think patients would benefit from having all of their data in one place, making sure everything is organized for them. And so what really excites me is that we are at that age in technology where that's totally possible. Now there are caveats in terms of government regulation, compliance, security, et cetera, that will get in the way. But I think with thoughtful planning, we can slowly knock down those barriers.
Nice. So we talk a lot about in this series too, the different skills we need to think about or to build, to whether it is, the initiatives that individually we're working on or within our institutions or kind of within our communities. What skills do you think that we need to focus on in order to address, the diversity of challenges, or really to kind of begin to overcome and make an impact?
Yeah, I mean, do you mean like skills as a health system or
as an individual? So if the audience members that are listening and want to start thinking about, okay, how do I build myself, or maybe even the skills that I use to build myself, I can use to build my teams, or just, as we kind of create our own skill set or toolkit.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things in running an efficient team is owning that, yes, you may have the title of a leader, but there's a lot to learn. And it's really important to understand what your limitations are and to build a team that is cross-functional, a team that acknowledges that we are all building towards the same mission. And we bring different skill sets, so we need to respect that. And what I look for in our team members, and as we're hiring, are people who are not only extremely intelligent and process driven, but are humble enough to say, hey, I'm struggling here. This is a mistake. I actually applaud that when that happens, so we can rally together as a team and troubleshoot together. And so that's one of the qualities that I really admire in folks when they're on a team, because it's not about the individual, it's about getting the process done and the outcome achieved. So that's something that I continue to encourage in our teams and the folks that we continue to onboard. And I think transparency is absolutely key to making sure that your team is highly functional. You need to know your blind spots and address them early on.
Yeah, no, I like that. Kind of recognizing limitations, blind spots, but then creating that kind of environment for success that we'll talk about also in a bit. Actually, let's jump into that. When we're talking about a lot about your own, limitations or gaps, and so kind of the need to, ask for help or state that when, you need the type of support. And so those are kind of different environments, and we would say. So how do you create kind of your own environment for success, building off of what you said? Is there a specific kind of thought process that you have for thinking about what is the best environment for success, or kind of how do you go about doing that, building off of what you just said?
Yeah, so building off what I've mentioned about owning your qualities, but also admitting your blind spots. I think, it comes from this idea in medicine where, Rola, you may have heard of it before, but instilling a just culture. Have you heard of just culture?
Yeah.
So making sure that let me take a step back. So just culture is basically empowering individuals to understand that it's okay to mess up and that it's okay to meet challenges and to voice them out, acknowledge them, and make sure that the team is aware and we address it. And so I think a lot of that has fed back into our company, where it's like, how do we have processes in place to make challenges less about the individual and more about the process? And how do we analyze what factors contributed to where we are today? I think ongoing reflection of successes and challenges is extremely important. And so making sure that you have that culture that is both nurturing, but also very much focused on outcomes, is key for us. Now, I'll say that I don't know everything, but that is something that I have felt strongly about, and maybe in the future we'll incorporate more things, but we've been heavily focused on process metrics, but with sort of empathy for the process.
Yeah, and that's really powerful. And I think a lot of us, though, the blessed ones are the ones that are in those types of environments where people are very supportive and kind of recognize that there's going to be challenges, and that it is not often, sometimes, recognizing the system of parts that goes into that. But for those that might be maybe in environments that don't have that as a culture, and we know that we need support. And like we had mentioned before, women might be a little bit more humble, or even with regards to support, many don't tend to ask for support because they see it as a kind of a sign of weakness. So do you have any recommendations for those that want to ask for support or go about asking for support?
Yeah, I would say don't think of it as a sign of weakness. Think of it as a learning activity. Think of it as like a project or a knowledge skill set that it's an opportunity for you to seek out and learn. It has no reflection on you as a person, but just sort of reframe it and be like, I'm curious to learn more about this, versus the mindset of, I don't know about this, And so I think it's sort of just like this paradigm shift, like just own it and just be like, I want to learn about it. And it's totally okay. I mean, I don't think people expect you to know everything all the time. I mean, that would be very, very hard. And I think, it is surprising. I've seen colleagues do this, where it's surprising where you'll find support when asking those questions. So oftentimes you'll see that you're not the only one wondering the same thing. And so I think that even just through that exercise, folks might find support there.
So the word success is a big one. Whether it's your own individual success or the success of your company or your teams. For you personally, how do you define success? It's a simple question. Life,
like, question though. So like in life or business or medicine.
However you want to say. So if someone's telling you, or do you consider yourself successful? Do you consider what you're doing? Like, the word is so big, and exactly like you said, it can be used in different spaces and can mean different things.
Yeah.
But if someone says, what is success to you? What would you say?
I would say, and this may sound fluffy, but I would say success to me is being able, if I were to die tomorrow, being able to say, I'm happy with the life that I've lived and the professional decisions and the curiosity that we've worked on and created. I think if you are working towards something that you truly believe and are so mission focused, I think that's success. The project may, I mean, all of us have worked on projects that have died on the vine at some point, but there's learnings to be had there, right? And there's also like life lessons, and it's like a day-to-day experience. So if you feel like you are working on something that you care about and you could be proud of, like if you were to, die tomorrow, that everything would be worth it, then I think that's how I would define success, whether you define it monetary, career, or whatever wise. Like, I just think that we are in such a privileged position, not only being born or living in the United States, but having the educations that we have, that like, it's just an honor to be able to work every day and towards a meaningful goal. And so, like I would define success in terms of personal fulfillment on whatever level for the individual.
Yeah, I like it. So we have talked a little bit about kind of the work that you guys are doing, but I would love to hear more about some current initiatives that you guys are working on to help address these big issues of information gap, and then definitely, touch base on, we hear a lot about equity and inequity with regards to multiple things, and especially with regards to kind of information within the healthcare system and impacting access. So can you just give us a little bit more information on some initiatives that you guys are working on, whether it be within equity or?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really am excited about Pluto, so Pluto bridges siloed medical data between different health systems. So we have about 90% coverage across the United States. We bridge EMR data, whether you're Epic, Cerner, or Allscripts, Meditech, whatever, and bring it all into one platform. We display that for both patients and then also providers and researchers. The whole goal at the end of the day is to make sure that we can help patients along their healthcare journey, save money for them, save money for health systems, save money for researchers. But the whole idea is to provide a platform so that it stays with the patient and they get curated insights and things that are of interest to them, whether it's a research initiative, a community initiative, or what have you, because we have the precious privilege of being able to have access to your medical data. We know what's going on with you. That being said, what I'm excited about Pluto is that we really care about patient privacy. We really care about patient ownership of data. I want to not only empower the patient with their data, but work for them. So as a company, we have committed to never selling patient data on the back end without two things: their patient okay, and also them knowing who the data is being shared to. And so I think as a company, it's a different paradigm, because there are some, data aggregation companies out there that will go ahead and say, if you read their terms of service, it's quite scary. They allow for third parties to copy, store, and share the data. So once it's there, it's kind of out of your hands. And so for both research and providers, it's extremely important that, at least I feel, that we don't do that. And we make sure that the power stays with the patient.
Yeah, that's very exciting for sure. I think that's usually a big limitation to many of these conversations, right? That's usually comes at the forefront of just like, well, what about the privacy? What does that ultimately mean? And when you can overcome that and you kind of think like, this is something that's very important to us, we can move forward and actually focusing on all the benefits of creating these types of platforms. So I think that that's really great. But counting all of this, it is quite complex, right? And kind of going back to the whole challenges and obstacles. So for you, we know that there's so many pros to this, and this is so wonderful, and to the system that you're building, but are there specific obstacles or challenges that just really keep you up at night and just think like, okay, we need to keep overcoming this? I keep telling everyone, I was like, I want you all to sleep, but just the ones that just keep coming to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think healthcare is unique because, and I'm going to say this as a health tech person, it's not always about the technology. 100% it's not about the most nifty technology. I think the successful ones that get adopted are ones that are mindful of the bureaucracy, the security, the compliance, the regulation, and understand the delivery around that. And so I think in healthcare, that's extremely important. I mean, there are reasons why we still use fax machines.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 2021 and we're still using a fax. I mean, I think as a company, you have to acknowledge and understand why that is the way it is today, and how do we innovate and address those sort of logistical and security barriers, so that you can really spur adoption. Our health sector is so unique, and I think that it is extremely important to acknowledge those in addition to the technology.
Yeah, for sure. So to really get at kind of the root of the barriers that are impacting people's ability to adopt or to go through and kind of understand the need or utilize these types of things. So now let's just transition into the topic of leadership, which is a big topic here as part of this series. We ask all of our guest leaders the question about how do you describe a leader in just a couple of sentences. So you said, the most effective leaders combine humility with purpose, caring for each other and facilitating a team's full potential involves leveraging each member's abilities and passions so the team could realize its full capabilities. Thoughtful leaders are able to harness their energy while navigating their teams towards a shared common goal. Can you elaborate on this and really what has shaped your outlook for this?
Yeah, I think I mean, I want to, there's a lot to learn, but, my style is basically surround yourself with talented people, learn from them, but make sure that you are navigating everyone towards the right direction. And so you have to approach it with a sense of humility, acknowledging that maybe your team members know a lot more about a certain area than you, and that's why you're on a team. You collectively, you're functioning together, right? And so I think that's important. But I will also find important is that people are working on things that they are passionate about, not something that I just told them to do.
Yeah.
So I love it when our employees take ownership of a task and they just fly with it because they are excited. They come up with new ideas and new methods to do things that I haven't even thought about, because we're really leveraging things about what they care about. And at the end of the day, I love continuing to encourage our team and saying, hey, we're going to really improve patient care. This is how we're going to do it. But, show me what you think pathways in terms of like the nifty tech builds or innovative ways in which we can present this data back or capture it for them. And so I think that's been super fun to see. It also makes going to work a lot more exciting. And it's nice to be around that energy when your team is motivated and passionate about what you're working on.
Yeah, they show up totally different for sure, right?
Totally different. They bring a different mentality, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, and that definitely has an effect on everybody around them in terms of, I think when people recognize that their input is valued and that it actually, goes into recommendations and kind of understands that whole pathway. And it builds off of, ultimately, like how we started the conversation, you were talking a lot about identifying your own limitations or your gaps and then finding people within that and then giving them that opportunity to grow, right? So we often think, okay, well, we found somebody else and then we're not actually as willing to either have them integrate and kind of show up to their full potential, like you're saying. I think is such a big next step because, like you mentioned, ultimately what you're working towards, you'll go towards that faster in a more creative way, in a different way than maybe you had imagined, and in a much more effective way as well. So you yourself too, given your current position and other positions that you've had in general, probably interacted with very diverse stakeholders. And as you look at kind of leadership within healthcare and maybe leadership across either it be technology or other industries, do you think that, you know, leadership is different in healthcare versus other sectors?
Well, I can't speak for other sectors because I've been deep in healthcare pretty much my whole life. Everyone has their own leadership style. Every company has their own culture. But I think the most important thing is making sure that your team understands its mission and to get their buy-in behind it. We as a company have experienced benefits of that. When you have motivated employees, like they'll work late nights, they'll work weekends, they'll try to make it happen. Like no matter what, if they're committed to not you, but the mission of the company. And so I think that is extremely important. Some of the lessons, though, that I feel like we have learned or translated from the tech industry are lessons on engaging, lessons on how do we make streamlined processes easier for patients, since healthcare has been clunky compared to other industries. So those are lessons that have carried over. But yeah, I guess, does that answer your question, Rola?
Yeah, no, for sure. Because oftentimes I think we think that, you know, when you're in one industry, and then you see the limitations or maybe see the struggles of leadership, and you think, well, is this similar across industries, or is this maybe specific to healthcare because of the obstacles that we have just in general? And then you find, like you had mentioned, there's these underlining fundamental things that are cross disciplines that really impact a leadership's ability to influence and grow their teams and move their companies or institutions or communities forward. So I think that's kind of the notion of just, do we kind of see that as different? I think in the technology space, because they're so used to working with those kind of across industries, the ability to kind of have that general mission and theme holds even more true, right? Because you don't necessarily always just have one particular area that you're focused on and you're working with diverse individuals. So now if you think about leadership, our audience really vary at different stages of their career. Some are students all the way to top executives that have been working, 20, 30 years in those types of positions. So as you think about leaderships or leadership lessons in general, what advice would you provide for individuals? It can be, for those that it could be pertinent to everybody or at different stages of their career, and you can be specific. But, what would you tell our audience members with regards to those that are interested in building leadership skills?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it with the caveat and disclosure, I'm still early in my leadership career.
That is fine.
I would say always think, I know, I feel like I've said this in a different way, but like, I think it's so important. So always be focused on your mission. You may find yourself in a leadership role, but it's really not about you or your title. It's about getting things done. And so when you refocus things that way, your whole thought process about like, how do I engage with my team? How do I make sure that our initiatives are heard? How do I ensure that like my voice is heard, but it's not like heard in the wrong way, right? With an iron fist, which is, I feel like, not effective. And so, I think that's important. I also have a comment that you attract more worker bees with honey than vinegar. So I live by that rule. My other pearl is lazy people do twice the work. So if it seems like a lot of work and you want to do it the fast and easy way, almost always you have to redo it again the right way and you spend twice the time. Another thing that I've learned from one of my mentors in the health tech space is her comment on never let a good crisis should our challenge come up ahead. So those are just some like pearls, but always open to learning more But I think in the end, just be empathetic toward yourself, like understand that it's a learning process, understand that there's going to be challenges, but like, just if you keep your focus and your purpose in mind, it should work out in the end.
Yeah. I really like that. We are often told too, as leaders, just kind of building off of that, as leaders or even individuals in general, right? Diversity of perspective. And we started out talking about the importance of diversity of perspective and diversity of thought. And that also would mean, right? Diversity of thought is that you might have people in the room that don't maybe agree with the initiatives that you want to work on, or maybe agree with what you're saying. So what has been your general approach or maybe advice that you can provide for those that, want to diversify themselves, but kind of often struggle with, the quote unquote, they think they need to convince the other person, or what, communication style would you recommend as you want build these diverse teams with varying perspectives?
I think it's acknowledging your team members' strengths. So, and it's also like taking a step back and saying, maybe we're talking about the same things. Maybe our goals are the same, but we're just viewing it in different lenses. And so what could appear like a disagreement or like a different point of view is actually, in fact, not. So spending time to understand if that's going on is helpful. I think it has to do with understanding like where the other person is coming from and their reasoning process for why they are proposing a said pathway or solution is important. Because I think once you go through that exercise, more often than not, you discover that you are trying to work towards the same thing. You just see it from a different lens. And then I think that's a good foundation to have a more open conversation about how you get it done.
Yeah, I like that, Joy, because so many of our guest leaders too have talked about kind of when we talk about communication, and I think the stereotype of communication is that you should be talking when you're communicating, or that there's when you actually so much of the element is exactly. So
yeah.
So many of our guest leaders too have come and we're like communication. They're like, listen, it's so powerful, right? Because you forget that like, you can, and like you said too, it's the same applies for if you're lazy, doing twice the work. And it's like, if you're only talking, you could also be doing double the work because you're going to be talking again because you still need to listen. So
right.
I think that's very, very powerful. And I think that's a theme that so many have talked about because of its importance, because of its significance, and the fact that you do save a lot of time and energy and, initiatives and money, depending on how you do, by truly and recognizing where you are alike, where you differ, and where the ultimate, and it goes back to your point too of like the whole, what is your goal, what is your mission, and having that be very mission driven, it allows you to come back to that much faster. To those types of conversation in general. Now, I did say I wanted to ask you about the whole equity line, because I know I'm just kind of also reading about, Pluto Health and how you guys are obviously focusing on addressing those gaps. And we know that gaps exist, and obviously like big crises, those gaps and disparities are shown more at the forefront. And so that allows us an opportunity to make sure it's part of what we're building. So how would you say you guys are working to address any inequities or disparities that exist? How are we designing that? Because you're not necessarily replicating what's out there, because what's replicating, what our real world looks like is not the best, because there are limitations. So how are you guys thinking about that or addressing it?
I think of it in terms of patient access and choice. So I view our job as bringing precious data that patients own, because it's like their data, back to them and allowing them a good foundation to make choices in access or choices in their providers. So one of the things that we do to address gaps in care is provide all of that information back to patients so that labs and tests and images aren't getting redone, so that they get insights into like, what are they doing that's good for their care, and what are the opportunities there for them that they need to take care of. So on top of aggregating data, our team also has data scientists who are building insights so that patients understand, like, here are the recommendations for someone with your condition, your age set, your sex or whatever, that you might consider doing. And these are based off of evidence-based guidelines. And so really bringing back that precious information to patients, I think, is helpful. One of the things that we try to do to bridge gaps as well is make sure that once a patient has all their information, that they're able to send that off to their future provider, or if they need to be in a clinical trial for whatever reason, say they've been diagnosed with something, or they have a rare condition, that they immediately can send all of their records in place without delay. And I think that making sure that that capability does not exist in the four walls of one single institution is very important. A specific example is, one of my colleagues, super talented guy, MD, PhD is in sociology and health equity. He loves this idea, because he's a transplant doctor, that there are disparities in folks who get access to transplant services in underserved and minority populations, simply because there are data scattered everywhere. It's harder for them to organize and harder for them to get referred to transplant centers. So one of the things that we are really excited about is allowing that capability to happen within a few minutes for patients, and then getting them referred to the centers that they need so that they're listed faster or considered. And so, that's one of many ways, but of how we're hoping Pluto can help patients.
Yeah. No, it's really exciting, honestly. Even just kept thinking about literally how access to, and I mean, from a cost-effective standpoint, like you were saying, right? Like, time is money in terms of how long we wait, from a healthcare standpoint too, with like, even from medications for adherence to readmissions, all of these types of things that have ripple effects. The more time it takes, the more barriers it has. So there is so much power in being able to group that all and have that access within minutes, and allowing that burden, because there's so many patients that once you start telling them, you have to go through this process to get this information there, it's just, they're not going to do it. So it's just so overwhelming. So that's really great. So I do want to ask our final question before we go into Q&A. So if you guys do have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box. We do always end this section with the same question as well, because we do like to take an opportunity to support one another and recognize the positive influence we have on one another. So is there a woman that has positively influenced you or impacted you? Can you name this woman, and why did you choose this person? And just also a caveat, just to be fair, there have been several women leaders that have chosen two, so you are also welcome to choose two. Because they're just like, we're going to just choose two. I was like, go for it. So, or you can choose one. So you can follow the rules and choose one, or break them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll choose two.
Okay.
Or three. I don't know. I mean,
Joy's like, let me just list about 20 people. There you go. Love it.
Well, obviously, I have to recognize my mom. She's a super awesome woman, and I wouldn't be where I am today without her influence. But on a professional level, I would say very early on, I want to recognize two people. So my organic chemistry teacher at Pomona College, Dr. Cynthia Salasi, she was my first introduction on what it means to be a woman leader in science. She also believed in me, and I truly believe I wouldn't be a physician today without her. I had horribly failed an organic chemistry test because I'm a thinker. So I have like a process, and then, she saw that I wrote out all the processes, but then the last final step didn't happen. And if you've taken an organic chemistry test before, you have to go through these exercises. And she saw that when she looked at my test, and she basically took it upon herself to tutor me and make sure that I passed so that I could continue my pre-med ambitions. But she tutored me, and I got 99% on the next test. And she would not accept that I would drop out of organic chemistry and not pursue medicine. So I truly have to recognize her for that. And then another one more recently is one of my colleagues, and that I went to grad school with, Jessica Federer. She used to be the chief digital officer of Bayer. We have had such a great partnership where we're building and innovating together. And I find the relationship very very collaborative and supportive. Like whenever there are challenges, whether they're professional or personal or whatever, it's nice to have someone that you can call who totally gets it. And I encourage like women in this field to have folks that you can, you're sounding block for them, vice versa. It's extremely helpful, and it's nice.
Nice. So we do have a question around, so it says, I have many interests in general, so across different fields. How should I go about navigating my different interests? Again, very simple, Joy, very simple.
Yeah, I know. You're asking someone. I double majored in anthropology and neuroscience. That made up my mind in college.
So how do you go? So if you have so many interests, how should one go about that?
So maybe find something where you can merge those interests, right? And so it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Maybe it's a new pathway that you're forging without knowing the specifics, but sometimes they're more related than you think. Where I thought, anthropology is a lot different than being a pre-med, but actually they're really helpful in understanding the patient experience. And so the other thing, if they're not super related, is to really pick something that you can wake up in the morning and get invigorated about. Like there are many passionate, many interesting things in the world, but very few where you can like get energized and wake up in the morning to go, just kill it. So I would just go with that. I think everything falls into place later on for a reason. So don't worry about your like 5 or 10 year plan. I've had like 25 or 10 year plans. They always change, but the thing that doesn't change is like how excited and passionate you are about your purpose and your mission.
No, that's a really good point, because so I told that once to somebody. They're like, well, then what's the point of making it if it's going to change? I'm like, no, because you need the passion and commitment. That should be consistent regardless of what the details are there, right? And so like you're saying, if you have like 25 different ones, but the general theme is you're working towards something that builds your skill sets, builds your, you have a mission towards something, but the actual details can vary, which I think so many people get caught up in the details, right? Which is good to have. You need the details, but that can change for sure there. There's another question around networking. Any suggestions or advice that you would have on networking?
Yeah, I would say that I'm not an expert networker, but I would, I love going to conferences and meeting people. Honestly, I think it's more about relationship building than networking to achieve like whatever professional endeavor. Like to me, the most meaningful relationships have been where I've really gotten to know the person, what drives them, and just being able to have open conversations from time to time occasionally and see where things are at. So I think it becomes really fun when you're going out and meeting friends actually, versus just thinking about your company mission or goal or what have you. And it works out in the end. There are some great forums, depending on your field. I would definitely looked at things like LinkedIn and some of the conferences, but that would be my advice.
A general theme too that we've had throughout the series is the idea of opening the door for other women in terms of leadership or positions or however they want to grow, and then the whole idea of opening the door and keeping it open type of thing. So what does that look like for you in terms of what maybe your company is doing or how you have built kind of your career? So how does that look like for you?
So I'm pretty passionate about this topic. I am dedicated to hiring a diverse workforce. I also want to make sure that we instill a culture that is collaborative and we hear everyone's voices, no matter what comfort level folks are at. So it's important to hear and acknowledge everyone is at the table. And so to me, that has been extremely important in the way that we've hired. You know, we aren't big enough to be super generous yet about like maternal and paternal leave and, you know, all that stuff. But I hope to be going forward. We are, you know, I just can't, we have some limitations as a startup, but like, I think it's important. And I think it's important to hire people who have the same beliefs or similar, where you're on a mission and you want to create a cross-functional, multidisciplinary and respectful team. I think that's I mean, it's a dream. So
yeah. No, and I like how so much of it, like you had mentioned, is you have to be very intentional. You have to think a lot about it. You have to think of that. And so it's not just something that, you know, some people think, okay, well, I'll think about it one time and it's going to give no, it's a very intentional process. And I think we had another guest leader too talk about, you know, a seat on the table, a voice on the table, a decision-making path, like the ability to make that change that all grows and all has influence. And right. And whether we open the door for women leaders, that door is going to be open, right? So whoever is also trying to and still be the best person to provide those types of feedback. So I think that's really powerful. And that comes in different ways, right? We all have, depending on our own decision-making capabilities, to what extent we can, hire. Not all of us are able to hire, but we can do other things like the mentoring and then growing that. And so wherever you are, like you had mentioned, your ability and the power you have to be very intentional about hiring, about, you know, the groups of people that you're surrounded with, that's also that responsibility. So, which is really great there. So we're almost at about time. So I think we will go ahead and finish the session for today, but I would really like to thank you, Joy, for such a great conversation around the topics of leadership, the work that you guys are doing. I'm very excited to kind of see more how this continues to grow because of the power and significance that the information plays in all of the decisions that we make. So thank you so much again for joining us. And then thanks to everybody for attending and those that are listening to the recording. We hope that you also join us at other events. So the recording will be available for replay shortly after, so give it a few days for that. And then you are welcome to either send us a note or tag us with any key takeaways that you might have or any additional questions. We'll be sure to tag the site, Joy, just so that if anybody is interested, I know this topic is of interest to many people, to see the work that you guys are doing. So thank you so much. And see everyone at other Insights from Women Leaders events, which are all available on our website. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Bye.